probably started for us in the 2020 lockdown. And we took time during that season. We were pastors of a large church here in Wellington. But we took time during that lockdown just to sit down and grapple with the question of what does the Great Commission look like? So we found ourselves reading the book of Acts and the Gospel of Mark, and the Holy Spirit literally broke us. We couldn't get through chapters without bursting into tears and going, we just want to see this in our day and our life.
We read it out loud to each other.
Yeah.
We just read it back and forth, back and forth. The whole of Mark, the whole of Acts, and found ourselves just a complete mess.
It's like we'd read a chapter, we'd burst into tears, we'd get on our knees, we'd pray, we'd go out for a walk, we'd clear our head, shake ourselves down, then we'd open it up and read the next chapter, and the same thing would happen. So
it's not like any of that was new to us because we'd read it before, but the Holy Spirit was just working in us.
Yeah, we read it, we'd taught it, we'd done everything, but like he was just saying, you know what, there's some patterns and principles that are in there, which you just need to go after. So that really catalyzed for us. 12 months after that, we stepped out of our role as pastors of a church and just started pursuing movement.
And you just stepped out. I mean, you had a stirring within you, but there was no plan, no organization, no structure, I guess, no income.
That's true.
That's true. Yeah. No, there was nothing. So I think we had a whole bunch of questions, and we wanted to say, how can this be simple? How can this be equipping people to be on mission? How can it be replicable? So those were questions we had, and we really took the questions we had and thought, well, let's start with whoever God would bring. And that happened. There was a couple of places. Interesting story. When the week we were about to resign from our position at church, there were some long-term friends of ours, people that we'd known, in fact, friends of our children. They were down in Queenstown, and literally the day before we were going to resign, they rang us up and we ended up going around for dinner at their place. And they said, look, we're doing this little thing in a home. We're calling it a church. We're kind of running out of steam. We don't know what we're doing. Could you help? And just the timing of that in the Lord was just amazing, because we said, well, yes, we can. We can't tell you why now, but give us a couple of weeks and we'll get back in touch. So they were really our guinea pigs, weren't they?
Yeah, because we were thinking when we read the book of Acts and we read the Gospels, and what we saw in there was so different from what our experience was in our own lives. And God put such a hunger in us to, I guess, just to go back to what we saw in the book of Acts. And so we were thinking, when we left our role at our previous church, we were thinking, well, we'll set up home churches. So that was already in our heads, and then comes this conversation. Yeah.
So we picked that up with them, and we thought, well, let's train them. So we took the questions we had and all of our learnings over the years, and we thought, well, what would you need to lead a home church which is on mission? And that was really what we did for the first probably 18 months as we trained people. We did over 3 weekends at a time, and so we gave them this massive, thick sort of manual of the things that we thought would be really important for people to lead a home church that's on mission. And we saw, they took that on board down in Queenstown. We ended up planting 4 churches here in Wellington with a group of people who did the same thing. We trained them and then launched them. And so there was some pretty exciting, I guess, sort of, fairly quick results, if you like, in terms of home churches being planted.
So God was bringing across your path other people who are on a similar journey.
Yeah. And people who just wanted to be trained and then just go and try and do it, be on mission in their community.
I think because it was that period, that COVID period, and this was 2020, 2021, and I mean, what it's like, Steve. There were a lot of people who suddenly started thinking, I don't really want to do church anymore, or I don't like the way it is, or is this how it's meant to be? Or so there was just this kind of itch that was there. There was a lot of unsettled Christians. And I think, to be fair, a lot of people at that stage who we had contact with over those first sort of 2.5 years were people who were just trying to re-find what it meant to be a Christian and what church meant. And so we were part of the journey for some of those people. Yeah.
But it wasn't just a reaction to, I mean, you'd been pastors of that church for 30 years. It was a successful, vibrant place. So it wasn't just a reaction to big churches and the like. You wanted to be on mission. So what did that look like?
I think for us, those first sort of couple of years, I think we unlearned more than we learned. And just the way that you operated, leading a church, the way that the programs that you do, the events you'd use, all the things you used as levers for growth, we thought, well, we want to try something different. And so that was where God was leading us. So a lot of the training that we did, even in those early days, was really, how do you plant a church in your home that will be missional? And what we were learning as we went through that was, that's a good first step, but it's not actually enough. And what we eventually got to was to say, actually, we need to be training people to be on mission, and the fruit of that will be gathering as a church that meets in the home that then goes and plants others. So that for us was quite a significant change, which happened over those first couple of years.
And when you say missional or mission, what do you mean?
Great Commission.
Great Commission.
The Great Commission.
Great Commission.
Make disciples. Yeah, Matthew 28.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we saw some beautiful change right there at the beginning. Like, there was this one, for example, I'll give you a couple of stories that happened right early on in those first few churches. There was one couple called Daniel and Marlene, and they really wanted to reach out into their neighborhood and into a part of the community that they were in ethnically. And so during that whole lockdown period, they began with their family a little church in their home. They invited some people who were not in church but who were Christians, and they invited them, then started inviting non-Christians, and some of those non-Christians started coming along for a little bit. They started to meet a neighbor over their fence, and it was during that time when you weren't allowed to actually physically connect with each other. But Marlene ended up leading this lady to Jesus.
Over the fence.
Over the fence. And so as soon as she was allowed, she was then part of their church in their home, and they discipled her, and their kids were part of that discipleship. And so that was so exciting for them. I don't think they'd ever led anyone to the Lord, as far as I know. So that was just mind-blowing for them. They were on a high.
There was another couple, Carl and Helene, who were in those early churches here in Wellington. And they just really were captured by the vision of reaching their neighborhood. So the street that they lived in, I think there was 100 houses. And over the course of a few months, they knocked on the door of every single house and invited people to come for a Bible study. And they were just tenacious. They got, pretty much almost 100% no's, except for I think 3 people who were actually believers. But that sparked in them just this desire to say, we've got to equip people to share the gospel and to make disciples. And it also awoke in them a real call onto cross-cultural missions. So they're actually now in Papua New Guinea. He's working as a cybersecurity guy for MAF, and then they're just sharing the gospel. They're equipping people to reach out to others. And we're seeing the fruit of that in a really surprising way over in Papua New Guinea.
Wow. What happened next was some of those churches didn't make it for very long. And there was lots of reasons for that. It was it's such a mindset shift to move out of organizational church, and also it's a mindset shift to step into being a missionary, an everyday missionary, right where you live and where you work. And for some people that ended up being sort of a step too far. And then there was also things that happened which really made it tough. So one of the churches, for example, had a wolf in sheep's clothing come amongst them, and they were just new, they were just establishing themselves in the how to be on mission. They were reaching out, they were faithfully sharing the gospel, and this person came in and caused an awful lot of disruption and took a lot of energy, and really caused what ended up being irreparable damage for that particular little church.
It was interesting that attack. Though the leaders in that church, I think a lot of them had really strong shepherding gifting, and so some biblical, apologetics type gifting, and so this wolf came in and really preyed on both of those. In the end, for a whole bunch of reasons, that church didn't survive. We were starting to think we needed to put a little disclaimer at the bottom of our training, which is this will be dangerous for your health, because there was so many issues coming up. But I think what then happens, this is getting into 2022, was it 22 or 23? And you, Steve, you'd actually invited us over to Brisbane. And we went over there to No Place Left mid-level. And we didn't really know too much about No Place Left at all. I mean, we'd talked with you a bit, and the concepts were sort of floating around in the background. But we've been looking for something or a group of people or just something that can help us. Who can we learn from? Who's gone before us? And when we went over to Brisbane, I can remember us walking into that room with the people sitting in there, and after about 10 minutes, we turned to each other and we said, we found our tribe. It just had this beautiful sense of, here are people who are on, the Great Commission is out front, and there's some tools that you're using which are so simple. And we looked at the ones that we'd developed and written, and we looked at the ones that they were talking about in Brisbane. We thought they're really close. And so that began a journey for us over the next, well, probably year and a half, of assessing the stuff we'd written, usually throwing it out and then just picking up the No Place Left tool. And that was a really helpful connection for us to have,
Yeah, it was real sharpening. And there was, at the same time, there was stuff still going on back here, which was really encouraging. There was one family who, they had a guy come to their house. That this is a family who was leading a church in their home. They had a guy come to their house to put in windows or fix a window or something, the window guy. And the husband was talking to the window guy, and said to him, shared Jesus with him. And the window guy said, look, that's not really my thing. I'm not really interested. But my partner, she's been talking about this. I think she would be quite interested. Is it okay if you talk to her? And so the husband said, absolutely. So him and his wife then reached out to this woman called Kat, and they began to invite her to come and study the Bible and learn together as part of the home church gatherings. And anyway, within about 3 months, Kat had given her life to Jesus. And so now 2 of the sons have given their lives to Jesus, and she's continuing to share the gospel with people in her family and her network and so on. So just, I think people were having their mindset shifted towards the gospel and to use every opportunity to just share Jesus and invite people to know Jesus. The idea of inviting someone to do a discovery Bible study, that was all new. But wow, what a gift. Yeah.
And New Zealand, like a lot of the Western world, it's hard soil. But you're finding, if we just start training and mobilizing disciples to share and to read the Bible, there's people out there who are ready.
That's right.
There was another story. There was a couple that we'd trained. I think they were in the very first group that we trained. And one of the things was just to ask people if they have any spiritual beliefs. And go forward a couple of years later, and they're talking with a guy called Quaylen, and they're friends with this guy, and they're having dinner together with Quaylen and his partner, who has then recently become his wife. Susanna, and she was a backslidden Christian who was slowly making her way towards Jesus. Um, Quaylen was not a believer at all, but he was intrigued. And this other guy who'd been trained, they were having dinner, and he said, "Quaylen, do you have any spiritual beliefs?" And Quaylen's response to that in the moment was, "Well, no." And then he went home and he thought, "Why don't I have any spiritual beliefs?" And that for him just started a journey and a conversation. They started doing Discovery Bible studies with Quaylen and Susanna. And then one day, Quaylen was driving in his truck. He's involved in a demolition company. He was driving his truck and he was listening to a song, a worship song, which just talked about the story of God from Genesis to Revelation. And he's in his truck driving along and he's going, "This is true. I need to give my life to Jesus."
Believed.
And believed. And so right there in the truck, he believed. And then he just thought, well, this is obviously the natural thing to do. So he didn't tell Susanna, his partner, for a month. And then they would, just before they got married, he said, "Oh, yeah, I'm a Christian." And she was like,
You didn't think to tell me?
"No." So they, yeah, so he's now, I mean, yeah, we'll tell their story in a minute, but they just the things God's
Well,
doing.
tell us his story. What's he now?
Yeah. Well, so he actually, about 3 weeks ago, he baptized a niece of his. And so, he was baptized 18 months ago, and then he just baptized a family member and in the river just the other night. So they are on fire for the Lord, and he'd always wanted to do this particular big walk, which is called the Te Araroa Trail in New Zealand, and it starts at the top of New Zealand and it goes all the way to the bottom of New Zealand.
It's 3,000 kilometers.
Oh my.
Yeah. And I mean, you can opt in, you can do whichever bits you want to do, or you can do the whole thing. And they don't know how much they'll do, but they decided as a family, they started praying about it because pretty much anybody who does that walk, or many people who do that walk, they're there for a reason. They're trying to escape something or find something or work something out. They're open to conversation. And so he started praying, "Lord, what if I did the walk and I can share Jesus with people?" So they've got 3 little kids, all preschoolers, one's a wee baby, and they just bought a small caravan and a ute, and they're about to head off as missionaries to do the Tararoa Trail. And they're wanting to share Jesus. They're totally trained up with how to share Jesus, how to share the 15-second testimony, how to share the 3 circles gospel, how to lead a Bible study, how to start a conversation, a spiritual conversation.
What's great about them is they're not waiting till they get onto the trail to actually start putting those tools in place. Quaylen will ring up and he'll say, "So I shared the gospel with my workmate today, and here's what happened." And then they're doing a Bible study at the moment with someone in the town where they live. And so there is just this constant putting into practice the tools that they've learned. So it's just exciting to see what God will do, I think, on the trail, but then also after the trail with those guys.
Yeah.
So God's been building, this is a nationwide network that's growing, isn't it? It's relationships like this are popping up. How many groups and churches are meeting across New Zealand?
We think there's probably about 10. In fact, one church just started a few weeks ago down in Dunedin, first one in Dunedin. And yeah, I think there's about 10.
Yeah. We're looking, the way we're thinking about it, Steve, is there's 16 regions in New Zealand. And so, yeah, there's about 5.2 million people in the whole of New Zealand. The amount of lostness is, well into the, 3-4 million, depending on how you assess that. But as we look at that, we say, well, in those 16 regions, the first step is we want to see people trained in all 16 regions, and then we want to see churches planted in those 16 regions. So if we looked at it right now, I think we've done some kind of training, and some of it might be a light touch, like just getting in for a day and doing a 411. But we've made a presence in, I think, 7 of the 16 regions, and there's churches now in 3 of those regions. So small start, but that's sort of how we're looking at it.
And you have fresh stories. of lives changed
Yeah.
by the gospel, of
Yeah.
discipleship, of the gospel going out.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And we had to start ourselves, of course.
Mm.
One of the things that we disciplined ourselves in was prayer walking in our street.
Mm.
And building relationship in our street with people. And we actually started a Christmas party where we would invite everybody in our street. There's hundreds of people in our street.
Mm.
And everybody in our street to come. Thankfully, not everybody comes, only about 32, but come to a party and hear the gospel, hear the Christmas story. And a couple of Christmases ago, one of the ladies, one of the neighbours who came, she really hung around at the end of our event, and was just really open, chatting. And so we ended up then meeting up again later and starting to build a bit of a friendship. And very quickly, I think the first time I met up with her, shared the gospel with her and my testimony, and she was really open. And so she ended up, within a few months, she'd given her life to Jesus. We did Bible study together and Discover Jesus Bible study, and she gave her life to Jesus and got baptized upstairs in the bathtub. And now she's reaching out to her family, and Nick's having contact with some of her family members. And there was another lady up the street who, when we'd done prayer walking, just really felt in our hearts that this was a house that we needed to go and knock on the door of. And so I just went round there one day to meet the lady and introduce myself and invited her back for a cup of coffee. Her name's Justine. And so she came down, and it turned out she was someone who'd been raised in the church, but didn't have a church connection now, and didn't have a walk with Jesus. Anyway, so just invited her into church at home, and she just met the Lord. That was wonderful. And very quickly there was a friend of hers who their sons are the same age, teenage sons, and this lady's called Vesna, and I know you've met her, Steve.
Yeah, I've met Vesna.
Yeah, and Vesna was going through a very, very difficult time, and with a relationship breakdown and lots of difficult things. And so the neighbor Justine was just started sharing Jesus with her. And so Justine's sharing Jesus with her. Vesna then says, okay, I need to receive Jesus. So she actually came along to our house, and we were gathering as a church here. And at the end of the gathering, she said, she stood in by the door just out here, and she said, it was just the energy here. It's amazing energy. And she's from the New Age. And so we said to her, that is God. That is the Holy Spirit of God. And he's meeting you, and he loves you. And anyway, long story short, within a few weeks, she had surrendered her life to Jesus, repented of her sin, and received him, and really powerfully met him. And then she had demons that needed to come out. She repented of stuff and got set free from that. And then very quickly she said, all my family's over in Serbia. She's Serbian, and so she said, I need to tell them. So she calls them up on FaceTime or something or other, and she starts telling them, I've met Jesus. And they sort of say, you're not allowed to say that because we're Orthodox. And anyway, she says, just bear with and let me tell you what I'm learning. And so she starts a Bible study with them. Well, now
online
each week, everything she learns, she then does with them on 2 different occasions during the week, with them at funny hours of the day and night. And a few more of them join, and probably there's been about maybe 12 or 13 of them, but 7 of them have given their lives to Christ now. And this week she's starting a study with another lady who is deeply in the occult. But Vesna's baptized these people online, like over FaceTime, and then they've baptized others. They are starting Bible studies. She has prayed for them, and they've been set free of demons over the internet. And she is faithfully discipling them. And in October, she's heading off over to Serbia to try to pass on some of the No Place Left training, actually, to these beautiful believers over there.
Wow. So you've got missionaries in your street.
Yeah.
Far from God.
Yeah.
Going, I think I need to repent of saying New Zealand's hard soil. Or maybe we should just say there's green shoots.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Breaking out. This is a wonderful thing.
Mm.
I've had New Zealand on my heart for a very long time, so it's so encouraging to hear the stories.
Mm.
What's the vision God's given you? Where's this going?
We want to see movement. We want to see movement in all 16 regions of New Zealand. And so the stories of Vesna, I mean, there's other stories too. I'll tell you another story, because God really challenged us at the beginning of 2024 to start a church in our own home. Before that, we had just been training others to do that, but we thought, well, let's start again from the beginning. And one of the things that God did really quickly was started to bring people along. And there was this couple called Jonathan and Jihei, and Jihei had been a early childhood teacher with our daughter, and so there was a connection there. And Jihei and Jonathan were trying to work out how to come back to the Lord. So they ended up having a conversation with us. They started coming along. And after I think about 2 weeks, they said, we've got a friend who's far from God. Could we bring him back? So he comes along. He comes along and he comes for 1 week. His name is Ants. And he comes for a week. And at the end of that time, he says, I've got to bring my partner. She doesn't know Jesus. So the following week, she comes along. Her name is Sam. And she sits in our lounge and she says, I've never been to a church or anything like this, but I'm open. A few weeks later, she keeps coming along, and then Sarah, you lead her to Jesus just on the couch just behind us here. And so they just start growing, and all four of them just get more and more passionate. They're now doing Bible studies together, and just this week, they've asked us to be praying for another person who's far from God, who they're now praying for and doing Bible study with, praying that she'll come to know Christ. And so we're just watching that sort of gone from us to Hattie to Jonathan Jihei to Sam and Ants to this other person. And so when you say, what are we looking for to seeing? It's seeing those stories in every region of New Zealand. And just that God would begin to make a movement of disciple making church planters right across our nation.